Hello, hello. I am Nestine Buerta and I am here to present the independent review. So, what we'll be learning about today is more about understanding what an independent review is, understanding how to perform an independent review engagement, understanding the independent review process, and we're going to be able to report on an independent review engagement. In this session, what we will cover is what exactly is an independent review, the independent review process, accepting the review engagement, planning and performing the review engagement, concluding and reporting on the review engagement. And then I also have a beautiful appendix for you with all of the resources for the actual review engagement. Um, so, in this webinar, we will talk more about everything independent review and I'll answer all of your questions. It's going to be about 4 hours long. We're going to go through all of the guidance in the IFAC guide for independent review engagements. I prepared some beautiful slides for you, so we'll be able to see exactly when is an independent review required, who can perform it, um, what types of qualifications do you need to have in order to be able to perform an independent review? Why is there an increased demand for independent reviews? The users of independent reviews, benefits of independent reviews, and there are a lot. The practitioner's objectives in a review will cover, and we'll look at the different parties to an independent review. We'll see what is the difference between audit, review, and compilations in every single aspect that really matters. And we will cover the complete independent review process. So, there are key steps in the independent review process that we need to perform, and we will be covering all of them in order to make sure that you are on the right track when you are performing your independent reviews and your engagement team understands exactly what is necessary for them to do. We'll cover the four different elements of the independent review process. So, accepting, planning, performing, and reporting. We'll look at different hacks and practical tips for each of those. Um, and the exact goal of why we have each of them. So, for example, with reporting, we'll go into more detail on the approval of the financial statements, the final review report, and then we'll look at accepting the review engagement. There are a lot of different factors that we actually need to consider before we can decide if we're going to accept an independent review engagement. So, we will be discussing all of them. We'll also go into more detail in the professional skepticism requirement and look at some practical examples, really covering why it is important for us to maintain professional skepticism and what does that even look like in practice. I don't know if you've ever been in a scenario where you weren't sure if you were required to perform additional procedures in an independent review or not. If that is the case, then this piece of the presentation is really going to help you wrap your head around whether you whether you need to perform the additional procedures or not. It all comes down to the professional skepticism that we need to apply when we are performing our independent reviews. Moving on from professional skepticism, we will then go to professional judgment. So, professional judgment involves the application of relevant training, knowledge, and experience within the context provided by the assurance, accounting, and ethical standards in making informed decisions about the courses of action that are appropriate in the circumstances. And under professional judgment, we'll look at different scenarios in the actual independent review where it will be required of us to apply our professional judgment. And we'll look at how that actually influences what we will have to do in our independent review. We'll look at the required competency. So there are various different competencies that we have to have in order to be able to perform an independent review. And we will make sure that everyone on the engagement team is aware of what those are, and make sure that we achieve that before we actually accept the review. There are various scenarios where we won't be able to accept a review. We'll cover all of those. We'll look at, for example, how to determine if our review engagement has a rational purpose and how that influences whether we can accept the review or not. We'll look at some examples where there won't be a rational purpose and we won't be allowed to accept the independent review. And then, of course, we will cover independence, scope limitations, and other ethical requirements. I will go through some scope limitation examples to make sure that you know exactly what to do in the various different scenarios that can arise in practice. Um, there are various situations that could raise doubts about management's integrity, especially when we're dealing with independent reviews in a post COVID economy. So, we will look at all of those factors so that you can recognize them in practice and apply them to. Um, to your independent review engagement and make sure that you act in a way that is acceptable to our professional bodies. We'll also look at planning and performing the actual review. So there are various types of guidelines I can give you from practical experience and then also from guides and opinions of other practitioners that I've studied. So we'll go through all of that. For example, there are some interesting things we need to take into account when using our materiality, and how do you obtain an understanding of your client that allows the rest of the review to be performed efficiently, effectively, and at the best cost possible for both you and the client. Um, Also, we'll look at why it is so important to really spend time on getting a proper understanding of your client before you dive into the actual independent review. And then from there, we'll basically move on to our concluding and reporting section where we will recap what is required of the independent review practitioner when we need to report on what we have done in our actual independent review. So, there's lots of valuable things that we are going to be discussing in this webinar. And I invite you to come and join us, come and have a look, come spend the 4 hours with us. I promise it will be very much worth it, and you will leave with a greater and better understanding of how to perform independent review engagements in practice. This has been Nestine Buerta. I'm a chartered accountant, and I look forward to seeing you at the South African Accounting Academy Performing Independent Reviews webinar.